Hey everybody, welcome to the next part of this Django React build. So in the first video, we set up our project. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to deploy it because you want to deploy early and deploy often. So before we deploy, there's a few things you're going to want to install. You're going to want to install G Unicorn, or Green Unicorn, I think is what it stands for. Pip install G Unicorn or Gunicorn. And then what you want to do is install pip install, I think it's Django Heroku. Okay, and that's going to be our plugin so we can configure Heroku. Good. And that's good. Okay, so we'll need those two libraries for the deployment. You're going to create a few files here. Now, first thing we're going to do is we're going to head over to our browser. I'm going to create a new tab, and I'm going to use a site called, I think it's called Git Ignore. Yep, gitignore.io. Now, this is a good site, like to find your Git ignores, or to define like, oh, what should be in my Git ignore? Although it's not. Oh, there we go. It loaded. Okay. And if you're not familiar with what a Git Ignore is, a Git Ignore is a file that tells Git what files to ignore. There's not everything in Django that Django generates you really need to upload to your Git repository. And there's certain things you just don't want to upload to your Git repository. And that could have to deal with like little files that your IDE creates, like VS Code creates like little files. It could be files that contain sensitive information, like .env files. When you're using Node, things like your Node modules folder. So what you can do here is you can type in what you're working with. So I can say Django. So there we go, see Django. And then I can hit create. And now it generates me everything that should be inside a .gitignore, like at least for a Django project. So I can just copy that, create a new file called .gitignore. Okay, and then just paste that in there. That'll prevent us from committing anything we don't really want to commit to Git. So there we go. Cool. And then I also want to create a proc file in here with an uppercase V. This is for Heroku. So Heroku uses this file to know, like, okay, we uploaded your project. What is the command that kickstarts your project? And what kind of command is it? So we know what we're doing. So we're starting a web process, and the command should be G Unicorn. And it should be to do, because we're basically what we're doing is we're saying go into this folder to do and run this WSGI file. Now WSGI stands for, if I remember right, it's like Web Server Gateway Interface. It's a way to use Python in a web server. It tells the web server how to use the Python code. Okay, so it's like to do .wsgi if I am correct. Okay, and then that should be it. Okay, on the proc file. That's literally all it is. It's just saying, hey, when you deploy this project, start a web process with the command unicorn to do .wsgi, which just means G Unicorn is going to go in the to do folder, run the file called wsgi.py. Okay, if you hear the sirens in the background, I live in Brooklyn. There's always a lot of sirens. You've probably heard that in my previous videos, but hopefully in the coming months, I won't live in Brooklyn anymore. Proc file. Okay, one last file we want to create. Now, Heroku needs to know what dependencies we do need for our project. This is the big reason we need a virtual environment. So what you can do is if you do pip freeze generates a list of your dependencies and then prints them out. What we want to do is print them out and put them in a file. So I do pip freeze, and again I'm using bash. So this is specifically a bash command. So if you're on Windows, the command that would be used for Windows would be different. So Linux and Mac, this should work just fine. If you're on Windows, probably easier to download Git Bash because you need Git anyways. So in that case, Git Bash would be able to do this too. Pip freeze, and then what we want to do is, and what this arrow is doing is saying take the output of this command and put it into this file. And the file that everyone's built to look at for is requirements.txt. Okay, and see that generates requirements.txt. So when I look inside of it, see there's a list of all the dependencies I have in this virtual environment. I'm going to delete this. This always causes a problem. Okay, that probably won't be in yours. Just for some reason, it's always in mine. Okay, and then everything else is fine. Okay, cool. So we'll close all of this. Okay, there's Google Home trying to talk to me. But let's see, a proc file, requirements, manage Pi, good. Okay, so the only thing we have left to do, as far as setup goes, is we need to connect that Django Heroku plugin to our thing. So basically, the heart of your Django project is this settings.py. The settings.py basically configures how everything works and connects to each other. So what we need to do is import Django Heroku. So we import that down here. And then we have to use it all the way down here. I always forget the name of the function. But I have written all this stuff down before. So if you go to my blog, toots.alexmercedcoder.com, and just search for Django, Control F, Django. So let's go to that instance of Django. Here we go. I have all these steps outlined here. So we did that. We did that. Django Heroku. Here we go. So this is the function we have to put in here. What this does is just that it overrides all of the settings to inject all of the local Heroku settings as what your project uses when it's deployed. So it'll point to your Heroku Postgres database. It'll do all that. Okay. Let's see here. Where's GitHub? And it'll automatically use Heroku Postgres, so you don't have to really worry about that. Basic commands. We do need this. We do need to install psychopg2, so that way it points to a Heroku Postgres database. Okay, now be careful, because what happens is that library needs to be compiled. So you need to make sure that your computer has like the right C++ libraries for it to be compiled. So if it doesn't succeed, these are probably, which is maybe on Linux, these are the files you would need to download to get that to install correctly. Okay. Cool. I'm not going to bother configuring this. Okay, the reason being is that Django Heroku takes care of setting up your database settings once you deploy. So you can just leave the default settings. But I do need to install psychopg because it needs to be in my requirements.txt. So pip install psychopg, which PG stands for Postgres. So these are the Python Postgres drivers. Okay. So let me just make sure that's installed. Pip list. And there it is, psychopg2. Was that already in my... Oh no, it was already there. Okay, good. That was already installed. So that's good. Okay, so I got psychopg2. It was already in my requirements.txt. So now I'm going to open up the terminal, and now make sure that the terminal is in your root folder. That's the folder with your manage.py. So if you're not sure, do an ls, and see, this is the folder with my manage.py. Because again, ls lists the things that are in your current folder. So there, I'm going to create the Git repository. So I'm going to do a git init to create a Git repository. And see, it ignores certain things because of the git ignore. The git ignore tells it what to ignore. And now I can just do git add dot to add all the files, git commit -m, first commit to commit everything, and then git push origin. Well, I can't push yet. We first got to create the Git repository. So I'm going to go head over to GitHub. Okay, and then I'm going to create a new, we're going to say call this Django React backend. Okay. There we go. And that's fine. Public repository, create repository. And then basically what you want to do is just grab this URL. Okay, so grab this URL, Control C. And do a git remote. So we're adding a git remote. I'm going to add, and we're going to call it origin. That's generally the standard for your initial remote. git remote add origin, and I paste the URL. Okay, HTTPS. I don't think I want the HTTPS one. I want the SSH link. Just because I have SSH installed, so, or I have it set up, so I prefer using SSH. If you don't have SSH set up, then you want the HTTPS link. I just don't want to ask them for my password all the time. So I went out of my way to set up SSH. So git remote add origin. Good. Now if I do that, now if I type in git remote -v, that should show me all the remotes connected to my Git repository. Okay, and good. That looks good. So now I can do git push origin. Now I am on the branch main, okay, because that's sort of like the new standard. So I changed my Git to default to set up branches as main. Yours might still be setting up branches initially as master. So one way you can check to see what your current branch is, just type in git branch. And you can see I'm on main, you might be on master. But otherwise, once you know that, just do git push origin and then the name of your branch. In this case, for me, it's going to be main. And that pushes it up. And now if I go back here and I hit refresh, here's my files. Yay. Now I can go to Heroku. And let me go log in to Heroku. And then, yeah, I've created a lot of projects on Heroku. Create a new app. We'll call this Django React Backend. Now here the names are unique, so they're not just unique to your account. So I always put my initials at the end. Okay. All right. Let's just start the whole thing over again. Django React Backend AM. There we go. So then we create the app, and there's different ways to deploy. By default, it's expecting you to use the Heroku CLI, which is a pretty easy way to do it, but it doesn't have continuous integration in the sense that if I push to GitHub, it automatically updates my account. I always have to do a separate push to GitHub and then a separate push to Heroku. I prefer using the GitHub type deployment, because here I just connect the GitHub repo. It is always going to deploy the GitHub repo, and anytime I make updates to the GitHub repo, it'll automatically update the website. So I never have to really kind of like play around with this again. So basically I have my account already connected. You may have to connect your account. And then I'm just going to look up my project. So I just type in Django. Only got so many Django projects. And there it is, Django React Backend. So I connect that. I want to say which branch I want to deploy. There's only one branch, so main. Okay, I'm going to enable automatic deploys. That means anytime I update the main branch, it's automatically going to deploy to there. And then I'm going to do a manual deploy because I just want to test it out right now. So I'm going to do deploy branch. So that'll do that. It'll take a second. So we just watch it to make sure nothing goes wrong. So we watch the thing, just kind of watch it. It does different things to make sure you don't see any like warnings or errors. So see, it's downloading all your dependencies. It's installing PsychoPG2. Oh, something went wrong. Let's take a look. See, it says push failed, push rejected. So something went wrong. Let's see here. Import Django Heroku. So I put that in there wrong. So let me go take a look at my code. Settings.py. It's underscore Heroku. As I can see, because this is the function I copied right out of my blog post. So this should have been Django Heroku. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a git add dot, because I gotta recommit all the code. Git commit -m. Okay, Django Heroku. And now that's been, now let me push that up. Git push origin main. That gets pushed back up to GitHub. Now that should automatically Now that's going to detect the change since I already connected it. So it should automatically begin building again. So I can just scroll up, hit overview over here, and you should see like a new build start in a second. So let's just kind of wait for it. You'll see like a new build should begin. Yeah, and there it is. Now let's click on view build in progress so we can see the build. In the meantime, after this is done, we're going to go over here and just show you some things you can use. Okay. So view logs. This is going to be useful like whenever anything's not working, you want to see those logs. This is to run the console in your project, so that way you can give your project commands. We'll be doing that as well in a moment. And these are other more fancier things that we will deal with later. Okay, that seems to be doing the thing so far. And done. That's good. That's positive. That's what we want to see. It's launching and it's launching. Now if I open up the app, it should still not be working. We'll find out in a second, but I don't think it should be working. Open app. Oh, it is working. Okay, so it is working. Mainly because this page doesn't really require any, this is like the default Django page, doesn't really require any kind of databasing stuff. But later on when we set up the database and we have models and all that fun stuff, we are going to have to go back to more and run this console, but we'll deal with that later after we built our API. So we've now deployed Django, and it was not too bad, right? That wasn't so bad. Once you know what the different steps are, it's not too bad. With that, I will see you guys in the next video. We'll begin building our API.